Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can all of you hear me? Is the voice okay? Alhamdulillah wa kafa. Wa salamun ala ibadihi allazina istafa. Amma ba'd. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم Today, inshallah, we'll be speaking about two things in particular. The main title of the talk is we'll be discussing the spiritual and the legal dimensions of fasting. So we'll have a discussion first about the spiritual benefits of fasting. Then we'll discuss some things which are legal, the legal aspects. And then finally, towards the end, we'll mention and say a few things about the very blessed night, which is the night of the 15th of Shaban. Because this is a night which is also fast coming, fast approaching. For some, this would be either tonight, and for others would be tomorrow night. So, inshallah, these are the three things that we plan to discuss. So, first thing is fasting and the spiritual dimensions of fasting. We know that in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that in the month of Shaban, and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, she narrates that after Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ would fast most persistently and consistently in this month of Shaban. And almost the entire month, except for the last few days, 2 or 3 days, the Prophet ﷺ would spend the entire month in a state of fasting. And this would be as a means to prepare for the month of Ramadan. Now, the beauty of Islam is that it's the deen of fitrah, and fasting has been prescribed in our deen. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, Allah says in Quran that we have prescribed fasting for you. The way we have prescribed this fasting for the previous ummah, the previous generations and communities, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that through fasting you can attain taqwa. And the beauty of Islam, we say, is that you can see the beauty, it's manifest in each and every act of worship, including fasting. The two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are Zahir and Al-Batin, outward and the inner. And there is always a connection between the two. So the Zahir of fasting, the outer of fasting, is that a person, they stay away from food and drink from Fajr till Maghrib. So a person doesn't eat anything, they don't drink anything, and they don't have relations with their spouse. They make the intention of fasting, and they do so. They remain in that state of fasting from Fajr till Maghrib. This is the outer. And the inner aspect of fasting is that Allah says that if you do this outer worship, if you fast, then لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, The hikmah of the benefit is that you will attain taqwa. Taqwa is piety, righteousness, the fear of Allah. This is a spiritual quality, the quality of a heart. It resides within the heart of a person. So there's a connection, a rabt, a relationship between fasting and taqwa, between hunger and thirst, which is outer and outward thing, and taqwa, which is inner. And the teaching is that we can attain this inner taqwa through doing something in the outer. We can gain this inner taqwa by doing something in the outer. So we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designed this month, the month of Ramadan, and particularly within this month of Ramadan, this ibadah of fasting in such a way that it helps us tremendously spiritually in our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how does fasting help us? What are the spiritual benefits? So we know that spiritually, two of the greatest obstacles that we have for our journey towards Allah in strengthening our iman, coming close to Allah in our spiritual development, in our imani development, two of the greatest obstacles. Number one is shaitan, and the other is our nafs. Shaitan and our nafs. Nafs means our base desires, our base self. And in Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He chains the shaitan or the shaitan and the shayateen. They are chained, and hence a person feels safe and protected from the wasawis of shaitan. But the second thing, which is our nafs, that is still there even in Ramadan. And in fact, between these two, shaitan and nafs, the two enemies that we have, the more deadly enemy and the more dangerous enemy and the more destructive enemy is actually our nafs. Because shaitan cannot do anything unless it gets this support from the nafs. Shaitan simply puts a waswasa, a whisper, or insinuation into our heart, into our mind. It's our nafs which takes over and then compels us to commit that sin, to give in to that sinful waswasa that came from shaitan. So the real culprit at the end of the day is our nafs. The nafs which is with us, and the nafs is a hidden enemy. We can't see, it's within us. Many times we're not even aware, and we're actually feeding our own nafs. So what happens is that when a person fasts, and this is the hikmah, this is one of the greatest spiritual benefits of fasting, that it induces hunger. When a person is hungry, a person is thirsty, and then on top of that, you're still doing your ibadah. So a person is praying their salah. When Ramadan will start, we'll start praying our taraweeh, doing itikaf. We will be trying to increase in our ibadah. We're increasing ibadah in one aspect, in one direction, one way. And on the other hand, we are doing this mujahid, this struggle, this striving against our own nafs by fasting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a person, they fast and they make their nafs go through that hunger and thirst, this is one of the most effective ways to to do islah, to discipline the nafs, to discipline this nafs ammara, this nafs which commands a person towards sin, and to make this nafs mutma'inna, that nafs which is the nafs that is pleased with Allah. So Allama ibn al-Jawzi rahmatullah alayh was a very big scholar. He wrote something really interesting about the nafs. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created our nafs itself, the base self, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked this nafs that man anta wa man ana, that who are you and who am I? And the nafs replied and said that anta wa ana, that you are you and I am I. You are you and I am I. And he said, I am I. And I have my own rank, I have my own shan, I have my own majesty, I have my own glory. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the angels that put this nafs inside the fire of Jahannam. And for 1,000 years, this nafs was in the Jahannam, in the fire. Once it was taken out, again it was asked, and now tell, Man anta wa man ana, that who am I and who are you? And the nafs again replied that anta wa ana, that you are you and I am I, and I have my own shine, I have my own glory, I have my own majesty. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the angels that put this nafs under this mountain of snow, under the layers of snow, and for 1,000 years that nafs was placed inside there. After 1,000 years, it was taken out, and again Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked this nafs, Man anta wa man ana. Man anta wa man ana, that who am I and who are you? And the nafs again replied that anta, you are you. Wa ana, and I am I. And Allah, you have your own shan and glory, and I have my own majesty and glory. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that make this nafs go through hunger and thirst. Put this burden of fasting upon this nafs, make this nafs experience hunger and thirst. And when the nafs was made to experience hunger and thirst, then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the same question, then man anta wa man ana, who are you and who am I? This time the nafs responded and said, Anta Rabbi wa ana abduk. You are my Rabb, Allah, you are my Rabb, you are my master, you are my cherisher, you are my Lord, wa ana abduk, and I am your servant. I am your banda, your abd, your servant and slave. So this is nafs. And this nafs has to be tamed. This has to be disciplined by this act of fasting. In Quran, Allah says, Afara'aita mani ilahahu hawa, that don't you gaze in astonishment at that individual who has taken their own nafs, their own their whims, their fancies, their base desires as their ilah. If a person doesn't discipline this nafs becomes a rival to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. It becomes rebellious. It starts transgressing. A person doesn't want to sin, but the nafs will force a person to commit that sin. A person will be saying no, a person will be wanting to go away, but the nafs will take us and the nafs will pull us and the nafs will then drown us into that sin. This is what nafs amara does. It compels, it commands a person. The way to discipline this nafs is through fasting. And this is the exact reason why the Prophet ﷺ said once in a hadith that, Ya ma'ashara shabab, oh, group of young men, group of young people who are young, the youth, the Prophet ﷺ addressed to them and said, Man istata'a minkum falyatazawwaj. That if you have the istita'a, the ability, then get married. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ. And if you don't have the means and the ability to get married at this point, then take fasting upon yourself. Take upon yourself this act of fasting, for this fasting is a shield for you. This fasting, if you don't have the ability to get married, don't have the means to get married, then start fasting. For this fasting will become a means through which you can break your unlawful desires. You can break the desires of your nafs. When a person, they don't discipline their nafs, then the person starts committing mistakes. They start sinning. They start sinning. And this is also the reason why when a person, they commit some mistake, they commit a sin, in the deen of Islam, there are certain penalties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept. Kafara. And the penalty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps. Many times these penalties are in the form of fasting. Many times the penalties are in the form of fasting. They're not in the form of prayer. That if you do this sin, you make this mistake, then the penalty is that you prayed 20 rakat. No. The penalties, many times, these kafara, they are in the form of fasting. For example, a person, they kill someone. The Sharia says that you should fast for 2 months. The Sharia is not saying that you should pray 1,000 nafil rakah. Why? Because the Sharia is saying that the way through which your nafs can be disciplined through fasting, that kind of discipline will not happen if you pray 1,000 rakat. Fasting is going to be more effective, more efficacious in disciplining our nafs. So we see in the deen that for any individual, whoever wants to subdue their nafs, their unlawful desires, then making this nafs experience hunger and fasting is extremely effective. The Prophet ﷺ said that inna shaitana yajri min al insan, that shaitan, he flows inside the arteries of a person, flows inside a person like blood flows inside our arteries. Any shaitan is within the individual, within our body, like arteries are inside our body. It's flowing, shaitan is flowing through us, the way blood is flowing through us. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that you should constrict these pathways of shaitan by fasting, by experiencing hunger. Because when you are hungry, when you experience hunger, this narrows, this constricts the pathways of shaitan. It makes it difficult for shaitan to go here and there. It makes it difficult for shaitan to put that waswasa, that wasawis into your heart. It makes it easy for you to leave sin, to stay away from sin. It protects you. It protects your iman. And this is the reason why in tafsir, one tafsir, it's mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he once said to the Sahaba Ikram that, what do you say about such a friend? What do you say about such a friend that you feed him well, you give him proper food, and that friend is embarrassing you? That friend goes and starts humiliating you. And on the other hand, you make your friend hungry and thirsty. You don't give him anything, and you make that friend experience hunger and thirst, and that friend, it raises you in nobility. That friend starts honoring you and respecting you. So when the Prophet asked this question, the Sahaba Ikram, they replied and said that, O Messenger of Allah, that seems to be a very bad friend. Okay, we are feeding him, we are giving him proper food, good food, and that friend is embarrassing us. And when we are not giving him anything to eat, we are keeping him hungry and thirsty, then that friend is respecting us. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that I swear by that being, I swear by that being in whose hand is my soul, that within every one of you, you have a nafs. You have your nafs, and your nafs is like that friend. When you feed your nafs, this nafs will become a means for your humiliation, for bringing you down. And when you make this nafs experience hunger and thirst for the sake of Allah, this will elevate you, this nafs will give you respect. So the purpose of saying this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this ibadah, has given us this act of worship, fasting, through which we can discipline our nafs. Once there was a pious scholar, and he was mentioning the fazila and the virtues of hunger. That this is a virtue, this is a benefit, this is a benefit. So someone in the audience asked that, oh Shaykh, you are mentioning so many virtues of eating less, of hunger. So the person was a bit amazed that, there's so many benefits. Are there so many benefits to hunger? So then that Shaykh, he replied and said that yes, if Pharaoh was hungry, if Pharaoh would have experienced hunger, then he wouldn't have said, Ana Rabbukumul A'la. He wouldn't have made that claim that I am the Rabbul A'la. The fact that he made that claim and declaration that I am the Rabb, I am the greatest of lords, I am the Rabb, I am the master, I am the greatest of masters, is because he never experienced hunger in his life. Because had he experienced hunger, then a person becomes straight in their mind. The nafs becomes straight. It's disciplined. It's refined. So we see that the real purpose of fasting is that we try to eat less. We try to drink less. And this is a mistake that many people make. Sometimes we eat more. So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayh, he has written a whole book where he has mentioned the benefits, the spiritual benefits of eating less. And before we come to that, we see that even in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are so many examples of how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba Ikram, they would eat less, they would fast. First example is the story of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, was unable to sleep because of hunger. So he went to the masjid to pray, and there he met Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu an. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu an was also there for that same reason, unable to sleep because of hunger. Now the two of them are there in the masjid at night, and then the Prophet ﷺ comes and sees both of them and asks that, why are you here? Because this is not a time when there is a salah in the masjid. What brings you to the masjid? And the Sahaba, both of them replied, they said that we were unable to sleep because of hunger. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that, Wallahi, that's the same reason why I'm also here. Now the three of them, then they went to the house of one Sahabi, and there they were presented with some dates and with some meat. And when they ate that food, while eating that food, the Prophet ﷺ looked at the companions and said to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, that Umar, know that we will have to give hisab. We will be accountable for this food that we are eating right now. We'll be accountable for that on the Day of Judgment. That after 3 days with so much extreme intense hunger, they're being presented with this food, and still while eating, this concern, this fikr was there, that we have to be reflective. We have to be thinking. We have to be thinking people. To see this lifestyle of simplicity and this lifestyle of remembrance, eating, fasting, and keeping it simple, experiencing hunger. And when you're presented with food, you eat that with remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with reflection, with the zikr of Allah. And if you can contrast this with what happens in our lifestyle, in our culture, the exact opposite. Instead of fasting and hunger and simplicity, we, mashallah, we have lavishness, overdosage. We eat overeating. And instead of zikr and eating with remembrance, eating with ghafla, with heedlessness, with absent-mindedness, no remembrance. So this is also a type of a sunnah, that we eat simplicity, with the remembrance of Allah. The second example was the Battle of Khandak. When the Sahaba Ikram, they were digging, this was winter time, they were digging trench. It was hard manual labor. And this was a time when they didn't even have proper food. And the Sahaba, they would say that we didn't have food, and they would tie stones on their belly just to keep them upright because of the pangs of hunger that they were experiencing. And then one of the Sahabi, when he went to the Prophet ﷺ and explained his condition, the hunger, the Prophet ﷺ removed his upper garment, and there were not 1, 2 stones tied to his blessed belly. This was the sunnah. This is the hunger. This is the stories we see. Third example was that when one Sahabi, he mentioned about a particular battle the Sahaba Ikram were part of. And he's telling his son that we were going through this battle, and this was some very extremely difficult times when we didn't even have food to eat. And 3 people would survive on one date. Three people would eat from one date, one khujur. One date was enough for three people. And they mentioned that we spent 30 days, about a month or so, in such a way that we had nothing in our with ourselves except for aswa, then two black things. Two black things, date and water. So these are examples of eating and hunger and fasting that we see in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, what do we take from all of this? Is that we should also have a habit of, number one, fasting and generally eating less. And there are different levels of eating less that Allah has mentioned in the deen. The first level in in Quran, Surah A'raf, Allah mentions the first level, which is the greatest level, the level of the muqarrabeen, those who are brought close to Allah, is that they would just survive on the bare minimum. Bare minimum, whatever is the bare minimum to keep yourself active and upright and fulfill your responsibilities towards Allah and towards people around you, they would stick with the bare minimum in terms of their food. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave a second level, which is that you eat, and if you desire to, you can eat more, but divide your stomach into three spaces, three portions. Have one portion for the food, second portion for the drink, and third portion for the air. Air means ibadah, for tilawat, for zikr, for mujahida. So to leave at least one portion for the air. That's the second level. Maybe some of us can follow that level of sunnah, second level of sunnah. And then if that is also difficult, there is one final third level, which I think all of us should at least try. This is the level. There is no fourth level there. Spiritually speaking, first, second, third level is that the Prophet ﷺ said that eat when you're hungry, but then stop when you still have the hunger for one or two bites. The hunger of one or two bites remains, you should stop eating. So this, if we can practice this sunnah about eating, then really we can benefit from the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept in staying hungry and also in fasting. I want to mention something about fast, and this is our own personal perspective. So many times people think that fasting is all about, or even a Ramadan is all about what you do from Fajr to Maghrib, which is fasting, because Fajr to Maghrib you're fasting. But really, Ramadan and even fasting, it's all about not what you do from Fajr to Maghrib, rather it's what you do from Maghrib to Fajr. And the power of fast, the power of Ramadan is manifested in what you do, how you spend your time from Maghrib to Fajr. Because from Fajr to Maghrib, you're fasting. And because of fasting, you are protecting yourself from sin. The person doesn't want to talk too much. A person doesn't want to, they're not inclined so much towards sin because of the fast itself. Fast is like a shield. But then the real challenge and the real battle is about how we spend Maghrib to Fajr. And there, if we can keep, if we, the mistake that we make is that we were supposed to lessen our food intake. But at Maghrib time, and when iftar happens, we eat till our fill. We eat it so much that we compensate. Sometimes even we eat more than we normally do. And then for Sehri, we do the same thing. We're eating and eating. We're eating 2 times every day, but eating more than normally what we do. So we should lessen. Overall, we should lessen 24 hours. We should lessen the food intake compared to our normal days. Now, some of the benefits of eating less and fasting is that, number one, if you eat less, you will sleep less. And then you can use that time for ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You get more time. You can use that extra time. You can do qadr, you can value that time. Allahu Akbar. If you read the stories, there's this one early Muslim scholar. He would eat raw sattu, like a raw meal, for 20 years. 365 days, 20 years, 365 days. Someone asked him that, why did you do this? Why don't you cook it properly and then eat this meal? He said, I did it once and I saw that when I cook it properly, it takes more time. And then I thought that I can save time by eating this raw food. And in that saved time, I can recite Subhanallah 70 times. Hence, for the last 20 years, every day, this has been my practice that I eat this raw cooked meal, raw sattu, and I save enough time that I can recite Subhanallah 70 times. It gets you more time. You use that time for ibadah. Next, it gives you more strength. More strength. The early Muslims, they would be strong. This is again counterintuitive because when you eat less, you might think that I don't have energy. But yes, Allah gives you the spiritual energy. The energy comes from then your zikr, your ibadah, your worship, your remembrance of Allah. That fulfills any deficiency. Person becomes stronger from the inside. They're more strength. That's why if you look at the early Muslims, they were so strong, fighting battles and doing work and physical labor and digging trenches. And digging trenches at a time when they didn't even have food to eat. They would be tying stones on their belly to keep themselves upright. And then during the day, they would be fighting, having skirmishes, fighting wars, digging trenches. What was that? That was the spiritual strength that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them. That comes from eating less. This is the asal maqsad, the real purpose of fasting. And for this reason, right, if we can control our diet, if we have a habit of fasting, this is going to strengthen our spirituality, strengthen us spiritually, give us spiritual power, this ruhani power, this imani power. Amma Aisha radiallahu ta'ala an, she says, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the first innovation, the first bid'at that became widespread was that people started eating more. They would fill up their stomach with food. That was the first new innovation that started after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. Yani in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the prophetic age, people didn't even think like that we have to fill up our belly. That was not the goal of life, that you keep eating. You would just eat for a purpose, eat to work. Eat so that you could then work and you can do ibadah. And if a person thinks that if I eat less, then I will become weak, my power will go down, my strength will go down, perhaps that could happen. However, this would make you spiritually strong. And this spiritual strength can compensate for any lack of physical strength. In fact, a person can become even more stronger. When a person is fasting, they can do more acts of ibadah. There is a certain, there is a certain sharpness in their ibadah. The ibadah is more effective. In one hadith mubarakah, it comes that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the arsh, the throne, and Allah ta'ala commanded the angels that lift this throne. Now that throne was so massive, was so weighty, we can't even imagine how weighty, how massive that throne of Allah ta'ala is. 4 angels were commanded to lift the throne of Allah. And those angels, they said that, oh Allah, we are trying our level best to pick up this throne, to pick up the arsh, but we are unable to do so. Allah Ta'ala said that recite this zikr, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. They recited their zikr and they were able to, 4 angels were able to lift the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the power of zikr. This is that spiritual strength. lifting the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Hadith Fatima radiallahu ta'ala. We see the story. We read the story in hadith. Once Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala and Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala, so many times it would happen that they wouldn't even have proper food to feed themselves. And because of which they developed some physical weakness, some weakness in their tabiya, in their temperament, in their strength. And on the other hand, we know, so that Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was doing a lot of household chores. She had to fill the water containers. She had to make the roti, the bread. She had to clean the house, the hujra, the room. So once Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, he said to Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala an, that there is some booty of war, some wealth that has come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why don't you go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and request if he can give you some helper, and that helper can then help you in this household chores that can make this task easy for you. So this Fatima radiallahu ta'ala, she went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with this request. That if there is some helper that you can send, you can use that person for my household chores. This would make task easy for me. Otherwise, it's very difficult. I have my hands become sore. So she went with that request. And the Prophet sallallahu he at that time, she made this request was Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, and the Prophet sallallahu wasn't home at that time. So she said to her that when the Prophet sallallahu comes, can you just forward my request to him? And then when the Prophet sallallahu came back home, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala mentioned that your daughter Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala, she had come with that request that she wants some helpers, some servant who could help her, assist her. So then the Prophet ﷺ went to her house. The Prophet ﷺ went to the house of Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala an, and she says that I was with Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an. The Prophet ﷺ came and we wanted to rise up to welcome and honor. And the Prophet ﷺ just said, keep sitting, keep sitting. This is in Sahih Bukhari. Keep sitting. And then the Prophet ﷺ sat between the two of us and asked me that, Fatima, did you come asking for some servant, some helper? And she said that, O Messenger of Allah, I came with that intention. I came with that request because this household chore is very difficult. I wanted to ask for some help. So then Prophet ﷺ said that, Fatima, shouldn't I suggest to you something which is better than this? Which can make your task easy? She said, yes. And the Prophet ﷺ said that before sleeping, recite Alhamdulillah 33 times, recite Subhanallah 33 times, and recite Allahu Akbar 34 times. This is better for you than having a servant or a helper. So Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala an, she says that we started doing this zikr at night. And as a result of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the tasks of the day easy for us. Those household chores became easy for us for the zikr that we used to do at night time. Up here a question comes up that a person doesn't have food to eat. They have to do all of these household chores during the day. They're feeling this weakness within. And you go to a doctor, and instead of giving you the medicine, if the doctor says, do this zikr, he's telling you some other additional task to do. That is exactly what is happening here in this story. The Prophet ﷺ is prescribing another task, an additional task, that is to do zikr of Allah before sleeping. Why? Because this will make you spiritually strong, will give you spiritual strength, and this will offset any physical weakness that you might experience. So we can see that the Sahaba Ikram, they would eat less. They would eat less, but Allah would give them that strength that comes from eating less, that comes from that spiritual strength. that zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their ibadah would increase. Their ibadah would become more polished. Their ibadah would become more refined. So this is another benefit of eating less. And then also when you eat less, you spend less on yourself. There is an element of compassion for the poor as well. This is another lesson that we get in the month of Ramadan, in the month of fasting, is that you think about the poor. You spend money on the others. You feel compassionate for others, that we have so much to eat and drink. What about those who are not so fortunate as us? You feel empathy, you feel compassion. Hence, it's encouraged that we spend on the poor, on the needy, the destitute. And then on the flip side, there are also several harms of eating more. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah has mentioned that you feel lazy when you eat more. You feel like a sloth. You don't feel like doing anything. He's written a whole book, Kitab Kasrul Shahwatain. Says that you feel inactive, lethargic, lazy. You begin to become heedless because when you're full, you're not hungry, you become arrogant. It leads to arrogance as well. Again, that same point that we mentioned before, that the greatest benefit of this fasting is that it subdues your desire. Subdues your desire, it also subdues your carnal desires, your lustful desires. And then what Quran mentions, one of the benefits is taqwa. That fasting enables a person to attain taqwa. In fact, this is the reason that Allah has prescribed fasting. And the maqsad, the purpose that Allah Himself mentioned in the Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that through fasting you can attain taqwa. Taqwa. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most noble in the sight of Allah is that person who has the greatest amount of taqwa. So, in essence, fasting is that we are trying to change ourselves through hunger. We are changing our relationship with Allah. We're transforming ourselves by feeling this hunger. It's an ibadah. And another thing about fasting, another benefit of fasting is that when you're fasting, you're doing an act of worship for 10, 12, 13 hours consecutively non-stop. Every single moment that a person spends in fasting, they are doing ibadat of Allah. When they do ibadat of Allah, nur and rahmat and mercy and blessings are coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their heart. And the person feels those blessings. The heart becomes softened. Many times we feel that my heart is so hard, my heart is so distant from Allah. I feel my heart has become dead. I feel nothing in my heart when I pray my salah. I don't even feel like making dua to Allah. I don't feel like reciting the Quran. I don't feel like listening to a talk on deen, to a bayan, to a lecture. We feel that we are doing things, but we don't feel the sweetness in our ibadah. We don't feel any joy, any desire, any yearning in our ibadah, not wanting to do, but just forcing ourselves to do. What happens is when you're fasting, and this year this would be, I think, 11 or 12 hours, depending where you are, 12 hours. Now, for the previous 10 months that we spent, hardly anyone can say that I was doing ibadah where I was perpetually, fully remembering Allah for 10 hours consecutively. But now with fasting, we get that. We get that virtue. We get that blessing, that barakah. And then as a result of that, the heart opens up. The crust begins to go away. The heart becomes softened. And so much is so that at the time of iftar, when a person makes dua, then the heart really wants to make dua. Those are the two special times we should make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is at the time of breaking of the fast. And second is the time when we are eating suhoor, tahajjud time. Tahajjud time. Those are the two times when du'as are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right. Now, also let me mention some of the legal aspects about fasting. So the first is the definition of what fasting is. So very simple. Fasting is that a person abstains from eating and drinking and having physical relations with their spouse and from ingesting anything voluntarily into your nasal or your oral cavity. So ingesting anything voluntarily into your nasal or your oral cavity, which includes smoking, right? So to abstain from all of these things from Fajr till Maghrib. And also have the intention of fasting. So remember one thing legally, that the intention is necessary. One has to make the intention of fast. So, inshallah, when the month of Ramadan starts, all the Muslims who are adults, who are mature, fasting becomes fard upon them. So that's one point about the definition. All right. Now we said that everyone has to fast, but there are some exceptions. So let's mention those exceptions as well. Acha, about the intention of the fast doesn't have to be verbal. It can even be in the heart, but better that you vocalize it with your tongue so that you become more aware that I'm fasting for the sake of Allah. This fast that I'm going to do, Ya Allah, this is for your sake. And Allah, I ask that you accept this fast from me and you make this fast easy for me. So you can verbalize that intention. But if you don't do so, you just have the intention in your heart, that's also sufficient. And remember, we are fasting for the sake of Allah. So keep reminding ourselves that the ikhlas is important. This lillahiyat is important. That we're doing it only and only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, this is your command, and I wish to fulfill your command. This is my niyat. So we said that every Muslim mature adult, they have to fast in the month of Ramadan. There's a few exceptions. So for example, the three. First is a sick person. Now, sick doesn't mean that you just have a runny nose and a headache. Sick means that if there is a pious Muslim doctor who tells you that your medical condition will be aggravated if you fast, hmm, and it not necessarily has to lead to death, right? If he just says that your medical condition will be aggravated if you fast, then that is a justifiable reason, justifiable excuse. A person, they can be excused from fasting. They can be excused from fasting. And if this was just a temporary kind of sickness, then when a person regains their health later on during the year, then they just have to make up for one fast for each that was missed. So just make up one fast for each that was missed. On the other hand, if a person is sick and they are permanently sick, yani there is no hope that they would be able to regain health and hence be able to fast later on in their life. So if there's that kind of a crippling chronic disease where there is no reasonable hope that they will ever be able to fast, ever be able to regain health. So if their sickness is permanent, then in that case, they give what we call fidya, which is 2 meals for a poor person for every fast that they had to do. So if it's temporary, the sickness is temporary, then you make up one fast for each fast that was missed. If the sickness was permanent, then you just give fidya to 2 people, 2 meals for one poor person. All right, so this was the first category that is excused. The people who are sick, they don't have to fast. Second category of people who are excused are women who are either expecting or are nursing. And if they fear weakness, as a result of fasting. So they are also excused. They can also then make it up later on. And the third person who is excused from fasting, from the mandatory aspect of fasting, is someone who is a traveler. And traveler means someone who's a Shari'i traveler, someone who is traveling to another place, which is more than 48 miles from your own town. So in that case, if you're a traveler and you fulfill the definition of a Shari'i traveler, then you have a choice. If you want, you can still fast during the journey, else you can fast later on. All right? So clear about these are the three categories of people, three people who will be excused. All right. Following everyone? All right. Next thing is, what are those things which can invalidate our fasting? Right? So things which invalidate our fasting. It's going to do something which are really common, which I think relevant and pertinent. And if there are some specific questions people can ask later in the chat window. But the basic invalidation is that if you eat something deliberately during your fast, or you drink something deliberately during your fast, right? And this is you're eating or drinking, not if you're so sick that you have to eat, right? It's not related to your sickness. It's just you eat or drink deliberately. So this will invalidate the fast, and a penalty which is called kafara will have to be paid. The penalty is that one person then will have to fast for 60 consecutive days. In this case, right, if they eat or drink deliberately during the fast, then they will have to fast for 60 consecutive days. And there's no alternative, right? Except that someone who cannot do this. Then you should give fidya to 60 fakir for 2 meals a day. So this is the kafara. 60 consecutive days fasting. It has to be 60 consecutive days, right? So this is in the case if a person they begin their fast and then they deliberately, without any reason, they just break it. On the other hand, if you don't bother to even start the fast, you just missed one fast, then you just have to do one qaza. You don't have to fast 60 consecutive days. 60 consecutive days is in that scenario where you begin the fast and then you deliberately break it. But if a person doesn't begin the fast, then it's just one qaza. All right. All right. Maybe I think what I should do is maybe have like a next time we can make a chart uh, of a few things here, and I can explain them in the form of a chart. So I just want to do this now very quickly, and then move on to the third disc part, which is the night of the 15th of Shaban, because I think that's also important. Uh, so all right, yeah, let me move ahead. All right, things which don't break your fast. Number one, if you eat or drink unintentionally, but as you know, you stop as soon as you remember. So that will not break your fast. If you vomit unintentionally, even if it's more than one mouthful, that doesn't break your fast. If you take a shower, take ghusl, use water, that doesn't break your fast. You give blood for donation purposes or for blood testing, blood test, that also doesn't break the fast. Use of perfumes and oil or creams, that also doesn't break your fast. Another thing is brushing teeth. Brushing your teeth, that's disliked during fasting. And if you put toothpaste on the brush and then you swallow that toothpaste, then that would require a qaza. Then you'll have to make up for that fast later on. So when we use toothpaste, actually it mixes with the saliva, and then we are swallowing our saliva all the time. So that would break your fast, and you'll have to make it up later. So you're actually endangering your fast by doing this. We shouldn't be brushing teeth while in a state of fasting. Right? So these are some things which don't break your fast. Things which are undesirable or makruh while fasting. Number one is chewing gum. Right? If it has a flavor, then it will break your fast. And it's, chewing gum, it's makruh if you put a thing in your mouth. Right? You just put it in your mouth and it's going to be makruh. It's going to be undesirable. If it has a flavor and it mixes with your saliva and goes inside, that will break the fast. Similarly, another thing which is makruh, which is undesirable, is that you gather saliva in your mouth, your own saliva in your mouth, and then you swallow it as a means of quenching your thirst. This is also makruh. It's also undesirable. And it doesn't break the fast, but it's undesirable. It doesn't break the fast because saliva is not a foreign object that you're injecting. It's already in your mouth. So it doesn't break, but it's undesirable thing to do. And the next undesirable thing is to backbite, ghibat. So you're backbiting, slandering, even fighting, quarreling, doing all of these things. This will nullify the purpose of your fast. So legally, well, the fast won't break, but person won't get any barakah, any kubuliya, any acceptance from that fast itself. It's undesirable to engage or indulge in such things like we mentioned. And finally, the last legal point that I want to mention is some of the things which are desirable during fasting, which are mustahab, preferred. First is that we should break the fast on time. When the adhan for Maghrib happens, don't delay too much. Break the fast on time and preferably break it with either dates or water. This was the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Don't delay breaking it because then it gives the impression that you're fasting for some other intention other than Allah Ta'ala. You hear the azan and then you just recite the dua and you break it. The second desirable action is that we delay the sehri towards the last hour of the night. So you delay the sehri, don't just eat at 12 midnight and then sleep, but you delay the sehri towards the last hour of the night, and also that you eat sehri, because eating sehri is sunnah, and eating sehri has barakah. Suhoor has barakah. Suhoor it's a food which has barakah. So one should not skip the suhoor meal, and similarly they should delay it all the way to the last hour of the night. This is also desirable. Next point is that when you're fasting, if someone tries to fight with you, quarrel with you, quibble with you, you don't engage them. You just say, Ana sa'imun, I'm fasting. And you don't respond, don't engage, just disengage yourself. Disengage yourself. Don't fight. Because if you do, then you will lose the spirit of the fast itself. Fasting is supposed to keep us aloof and away from such things like fights and responding and backbiting and so on, other things. And the fourth desirable thing is that when a person is fasting, then like we mentioned, to make dua at those two special times, the time of suhoor and the time of iftar, for these are times when the duas are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another desirable act is to use miswak. Use miswak. Miswak is permissible during fasting. So we can use that as well. So these were some of the legal points that we wanted to mention regarding fasting. If we get a chance, inshallah, we may share more things in the course of the next two sessions. Now, the last thing that we want to mention before we end is this night, which is just coming up, which is the 15th of Shaban. And this is a, is a particularly important night, which is known as the night of Shab-e-Bara'a. And more than 17 Sahaba Ikram, they have narrated some virtue, some merit about this night. So this night has an established virtue. And even though the individual chain might be weak, but then when you have multiple corroboration, in this case more than 10 Sahaba, but 17 Sahaba establishing the merit and virtue, it erases the stature of those narrations, and then it establishes the merit and virtue of this night. So this is a night which a person should spend in ibadah. A person should spend in nafil, in praying salah, in reciting the Quran, in making dua, in just remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a very blessed night. And according to some ulama, they say that this is also the night of budget. So this needs to be understood. Like different countries, they have budgets, and in the budget, they decide upon the decisions that they're going to take in the upcoming year. For example, we're going to spend here, spending on education will be this thing, spending on agriculture would be this, ministry, defense affairs would be this much. So we decide this is what budgets are. Exactly in the same way it comes that on the night of the 15th of Shaban, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the angels that for the upcoming year, whatever events, major events that are supposed to take place, to start compiling the list, start making a list of the major events that are supposed to come in this individual's life. Which person will get health, which will get sickness, which person will will pass away, which person will continue to live, which person will get financial prosperity, someone's risk will be constricted, someone may get izzah and respect in the upcoming year, someone might have to face some embarrassment or humiliation, someone might get some joy, happiness in the year, someone might get some sadness or experience some loss or grief in the upcoming year. Who will be blessed with the nemat of Iman? For whom this nemat of Iman will be taken away from them? So these are the decisions which are taken in this night. And this list and the writing of this list continues all the way till the 27th of Ramadan. And at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then finalizes this list and hands it over to the angels. And then for the entire upcoming year, decisions happen in accordance with this list. So the Prophet ﷺ said that on this night, the decisions of a person's destiny, their taqdeer, are being decided. And hence I wish that when these decisions are being made, I wish to be in a state of fasting. And hence the Prophet would have a habit of fasting, in fact, in the whole month. And we know that 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th was this continuous sunnah of the Prophet. So with that intention of the sunnah, we should also try to fast in this month, especially the 13th, 14th, and 15th. in one hadith Mubarakah, and Hazrat Abu Umama radiallahu ta'ala, and he is the Ravi, he is the narrator, and he was one of the leaders of a tribe. And once when he was coming to meet the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah sent a revelation to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that this person is coming, he's a well-respected member of his tribe, so honor him when he comes to you. When the person came, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he stood up and welcomed him and laid down his own chadar. However, the Sahabi, he folded that chadar, that cloth, and gave it back to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said that it doesn't befit me to step on this chadar of yours. So at this, the Prophet ﷺ said that Abu Umama Kanzul Adab. Abu Umama is the treasure of adab, of etiquettes, of respect. So that Hazrat Abu Umama radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said that Man sama yawman min Sha'ban, that whoever fasts one day of Sha'ban, one day, futihat lahu abwabul jinan, Allah opens the doors of Jannat for them. Wa ghullikat alayhi abwabun niran, and Allah shuts down all the doors of Jahannam for that person. Imagine if this is the fazilat for one fast, then we should try to maximize on this opportunity. Fast as much as we can. Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, it's narrated from him that he said that on the night of the 15th of Shaban, you should do qiyam. Do qiyam, and do qiyam during the night. Qiyamul layl. Give life to your night on this night. And you spend the night in the ibadat of Allah. Spend the night, as much of the night as you can in the ibadat of Allah on this the middle of the Shaban, the middle night of Shaban. And then fast on the day, during the day as well. For this night, after the sun sets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends on the lowest of heavens. Allah's rahmat, it descends on the lowest of heavens. And then there is a munada announcer who is making announcement. Is there anyone to seek forgiveness that that person should be forgiven? Is there anyone who wants to get a rizq such that the rizq would be given? Is there anyone who has a need that person's need would be fulfilled? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is these announcements are being made from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these announcements to get the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we should also try to make use of this time and try to make effort to get this rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a blessed night. Even Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah has also established the merit and the virtue of this night, and he also encourages that people should try to rise up and pray and do as much ibadah as they can in this night. It's a night of kubuliyah. It's a night of the kubuliyat of our du'as. We spend our whole year complaining and doing shikwa before others that I am going through this difficulty, I'm going through this crisis. We are telling stories about we are telling our stories to other people, that this is happening wrong in my life and that is happening wrong in my life. And then we knock at one person's door that, can you help me? We knock at another person's door that, can you do something for me? Now, and then what happens is nothing happens, right? People turn away, people say that go, we are not able to fulfill our needs. And at the end of the day, we come back. And people then even become badazan, they begin to have misgivings about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. That we are also making dua, but what happens, our duas are not being accepted. Ma'azallah, aliyadu billah, they start making sentences about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah doesn't listen to us, Allah doesn't accept our duas. Now, the solution to all of that is that when this night, when the decisions are being made, when the pen is moving, then why shouldn't we just present ourselves before Allah with humility? We seek forgiveness for our sins. We try to cry before Allah and try to win over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this night, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can decree good decisions for us, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can decree khair for us during the upcoming year. So we should make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make ihtimam, make arrangement of dua for. Dua is a mustaqil, it's an ibadah. Ad-dua huwal ibadah, ad-dua mukhul ibadah. It's the essence of worship. We think dua is some cultural thing, some additional add-on. I make salah. Salah was my ibadah, and dua is just a flick my hands. I just wipe my face with my hands, and then that's over. Sometimes this is how we make dua. 15-second dua, 30-second dua. And then when you ask them, what were you asking? What dua did you make? The other person doesn't even know what they said. Rabbana zalamna, Rabbana atina, Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana. And sometimes we don't even know what duas we are uttering, what sentences we are saying, and just 15, 20 seconds, it's over. This is not dua. This is just words of dua. Dua is to be made with our heart. Dua we have to make with our heart. We make this mistake that we are making dua. It's as if we are assigning task to Allah Ta'ala. Allah my job, Allah my career, Allah my wife, Allah my marriage, Allah my car, Allah my factory. We're not assigning tasks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are supposed to make dua with our heart, with humility, like a beggar. Like a person was begging for $1, for one penny, the way, you look at their hands. Their hands are shaking when they're making dua. Their hands are shaking when they're asking. Their words, look at the words. The words are, you can see the words are shaking. The words are, the dard and the sadness and the grief with which they're uttering those words. And then you look at their face and you see this innocence and this maskana, this humility, this humbleness in their demeanor, in their attire, in the way they carry themselves. They're doing all of that just to get some small amount in the dunya. This is how to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Put that level of humility, that level of humbleness, put that level of attention and ajizi and humbling in ourselves before Allah, presenting ourselves before Allah. To make dua with humility and to make dua, putting all our hopes towards Allah, hopeful in the rahmat of Allah, not losing hope, not being pessimistic, not becoming hopeless, but attaching ourselves with Allah, attaching our hopes with Allah. Allah, we are putting all our hopes with you, with your rahmah. Allah, we don't have any place other to go to you. We don't have any place other than you to go to. Allah, we are attaching ourselves with your door. Allah, you and you alone. Allah, just like we recite in Surah Fatiha, that Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in. Allah, just like you have prohibited, you have prevented us, you have prevented our foreheads from bowing, from prostrating before anyone else other than you. Allah, in the same way, prevent our hands from spreading in front of anyone other than you. Iyaka nasta'in. Allah, prevent our hands from spreading, from extending in front of anyone other than you. Allah, we just have this one door. This is the door through which the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam used to get. This is the door through which the Ummati will also get from that same door. This is the door through which our teachers and the Mashaykh would get. This is the door through which the students would also get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the door through which the Sahaba, the Awliya, the Siddiqeen, the Salihin, the Shohada, all got from this door. This is that same door that we also have to attach ourselves to. There is no other door. So putting our hopes, all our hopes with Allah. Allah is so Rahim, Allah is so Kareem, Allah wants to give. There's such a big difference. We are muhtaj, we are needy, we are dependent for every single thing. And Allah Ta'ala is independent, He owns all the treasures. Allah owns all the treasures. Lahu maqalidu samawati wal ard. The keys for all the heaven, the keys for the treasures of the heavens and the earth, they are in the hands of Allah. And we need every single blessing from Allah. We are muhtaj, we are needy. And look at the rahmat of Allah. Subhanallah. When a person they ask Allah Ta'ala once, Allah gives it to them. They ask Allah Ta'ala twice, Allah gives it to them. A person who keeps asking Allah Ta'ala, they are always asking Allah, and they're asking Allah for everything that they need. Allah Ta'ala includes that person among his awliya, among his friends. Then look at this person. He only asks from me and me alone. Doesn't turn his gaze anywhere else. Doesn't turn his gaze to anyone else. He's just always looking at me. Allah loves such a person. And you can ask Allah for less. You can ask Allah for more. Allah will give it to you happily. The Prophet ﷺ said that if you want you break a shoelace, you want a shoelace, small thing. Ask Allah for that shoelace. Allah will give it to you happily. You want big, you want Jannat. You want Jannatul Firdaus. You want the Suhbah of the Prophet ﷺ. You want the Rada and Liqa of Allah, the Qurb of Allah, the Muhabbat and the ma'rifat of Allah, the closeness, nearness, intimacy, love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, big things. Ask Allah ta'ala. Allah will give it to you happily. That same happiness. Same happiness. And every time you ask Allah, every time Allah will give it to you with the same happiness. In dunya, what happens? We see that someone comes to your car and they beg that please give it to me. Please give something to me. And you say, please go away. They say, please give it to me. You say, please go away. They say, please give it to me. You say, and again, at the end of the day, you say, just give it. And you just want to save your life. That here, take this money and leave me. Leave me alone. We give, but we are agitated when we're giving. Subhanallah, Allah gives every time. Allah gives happily. Allah gives happily. Allah gives lovingly. Allah wants to give. In fact, in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that that individual who doesn't make dua to Allah, doesn't ask from Allah, then yaghzib alayhi. Allah becomes upset. Allah becomes angry. That why aren't you asking? I want to give. Ask so that I can give it to you. So make dua, put all your hopes with Allah. Attach yourself with Allah, make dua with certainty. In Hadith Qudsi, it comes, Ana inda zanni abdi bi. That I am with my servant as he thinks about me, as she thinks about me. Make dua with hope. Make dua with certainty. Make dua with humility. And then see how the rahmat of Allah opens up. How the rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up. Allah wants to give. Allah's irada is Allah wants to give. That's why Allah gave us this month of Shaban. That's why Allah gave us this blessed month of Shaban, these blessed nights of Shaban, this blessed night of the 15th of Shaban. Allah wants to give. Allah wants to give. That's why Allah is bringing you to His door. Otherwise, Allah Ta'ala could have just turned us away from His door. Allah could have just turned us away from His door if He never wanted to give it to us. The fact that He's bringing us to His door and giving us this opportunity, it's a sign, it's an alamat that Allah's irada is khair. Allah's intention is khair. Allah wants to give. And now it's up to us. It's up to us how much we take from Allah. Now we have to ask from Allah. That we have to make an effort. We have to make an effort to seek out the rahmat of Allah. Some people will go all the way. Our Mashaykh, we were mentioning fasting. Our Mashaykh, they had a habit that they would make dua like a mustaqil amal, like a mustaqil act of ibadah. Continuing to make ibadah, and they would make dua not for minutes or seconds, hours. They would spend Asr to Maghrib in masjid making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. And then when a person says that I don't know what dua to make. And this is our condition. We raise our hand. After 1 minute, we start thinking, then now what should I say? Now what should I ask? So our Mashaykh, they give us the answer. Anytime when you're making dua and you reach a point where you say, now what should I say? Now what should I ask? We should make dua to Allah that, Ya Allah, now I've run out of ideas. Now Allah, I ask you that you teach me how to make dua. We don't even know how to make dua. Allah, you teach me what I should ask from you. Allah, you teach me the way that I should ask from you. You teach me all the ni'mat that I should ask from you. Allah, I'm handing myself over to you. Allah, teach me how to make dua. Teach me how I should ask from you. And if there's a person who says, I feel my heart is dead. I don't feel like making dua. I don't feel like worshiping Allah. Even on this night, I don't feel like listening to anything. I don't feel like doing anything. I don't feel like doing anything extra. I feel my heart is dead. I feel my heart is all corrupted. I feel my heart is all dark. I don't feel any. I just pray because it's a burden. I just pray because I have to. And, I don't feel like doing anything. If that is our condition, then one thing we should be scared about ourselves. But secondly, that even if that is our condition, just present yourself before Allah on this night. Whatever we are, whatever condition, no matter how dead the heart, how crusted the heart is, just present whatever you have before Allah. Allah, this is who I am. Allah, I present myself to you. Allah wants to take us. Allah wants to wipe us. Allah wants to purify our hearts. Allah will shower His rahmat, His grace. Allah will make alive the dead heart. Allah will purify that impure heart. Allah wants to do that. All we need to do is just make effort. It's not about the result. It's just, Allah just wants to see the sacrifice that we're willing to make. Allah will not take your sacrifice. Allah does not take sacrifices. He just wants to see whether we can make a sacrifice. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, Sayyidina Yusuf, Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam. Allah just wanted to see whether they are willing to make a sacrifice. Allah will never take sacrifice from you. This is the adat of Allah Ta'ala. Allah just wants to see how true they are. Allah just wants to see that first step, that baby step, that one and a half step. Allah, this is what Allah, I don't feel like doing anything, but I'm just bringing myself before you. Allah, I ask you that you, Allah, just soften my heart. And then see how the rahmat of Allah comes alive. This is the month of rahmah. I'll just mention a few things before I end. Remember, the Shaykh al-Hadith Maulana Zakaria rahmatullah, he said that the month of Ramadan, the way a person spends the Ramadan is the way they will spend the entire next year, the upcoming 11 months. If a person can spend the Ramadan in a state, in a good manner, with good feelings, with the good remembrance of Allah, the entire year they will spend with that same kafiyat, with that same feelings, with that same remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the other hand, if a person spends Ramadan with a distracted, diverted, heedless, forgetful, betarti, muntashir, scattered all over the place, then their entire year they will be scattered. They will be distracted. And if we want a good Ramadan, if we want a wholesome Ramadan, if we want a Ramadan of remembrance of Allah, for that we need to start right now in Shaban. We need to start these nights, these days, and prepare before the month of Ramadan begins. Whatever ibadat that we want to excel in Ramadan, begin not on the first of Ramadan. Begin right now. Increase your recitation of the Quran right now. If you want that, I want to recite 5 juz every day in Ramadan. Now, it won't happen on day one. You start on first Ramadan, I will pray 5 juz. After 1 juz, you will become tired. We have to begin right now. Build gradually. Ibadah, dua, tilava. So this is the night for making dua. And last hadith before, one or two, second last hadith. One is Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. He said that, Kum laylatan nisfi min sha'ban. That do qiyamul layl on the middle of the, yani 15th, the night of the 15th of Shaban. Yani spend the night as much as possible in ibadah. فَإِنَّهُ لَيْلَةٌ مُبَارَكَةٌ. For this is a night of barakah. It's a night of blessings. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَقُولُ فِيهَا هَلْ مِن مُسْتَغْفِرٍ فَأَغْفِرُ لَهُ. For then, on this night, Allah, there is an announcer who makes this announcement on behalf of Allah, that is there anyone who seeks forgiveness, such that person's sins are forgiven? So we are seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is our Allah's rahmat, that Allah is blessing us, inshallah, with this opportunity, that Allah is making this whole announcement, that is there anyone who wants to be forgiven, such that we can forgive? Anyone who wants to ask for forgiveness? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned about this night, that on this night, the number of people who are forgiven by Allah, he gave an example of a tribe, the tribe of Bani Kalb, which were known for herding goats. And they had so many goats that when the goats would come out, they would fill the entire area between 2 mountains. The entire valley would be filled with goats. The Prophet ﷺ said that the number of hair on the back of those goats of Bani Kalb, that is the number of people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emancipate from the hellfire on this one night. It's a day, it's a night of bara'ah, emancipation from the hellfire. So sins are forgiven. Sins are forgiven, and the taqdeer is being decided. The decisions can be made for us, in our favor for us. Last thing that comes in hadith is that on this night, Allah Ta'ala can forgive. Allah forgives many, many big sins. But there are 2 sins which are not forgiven on this night as well. Everyone is forgiven except for 2 individuals. First is that person commits shirk. And second is that person who has a malice in their heart for someone else. Kina. Now, just shirk. What is shirk? Shirk, there are two types. Shirk-e-jali and shirk-e-khafi. Shirk-e-jali is that someone worships a statue or a stone or a tree or stars, something outward. And shirk-e-khafi is a person worships their own nafs. We had a whole started the discussion with the nafs. We're coming back and ending with the nafs. Shirk-e-khafi is that you set your nafs as a rival to Allah. You bow before the nafs. You bow before the unlawful desires of your nafs. You are ruled by the desires of your nafs. Imam Rabbani rahmatullah said that a person cannot feel the sweetness of true iman until they make tawbah from both shirk-e-jali as well as shirk-e-khafi. We set up these rivals. Sometimes the nafs itself becomes a rival to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah wishes X, nafs wants Y. And if you reflect, we realize that today our hearts are filled with such unlawful desires, unlawful loves, nafsani, shaitani. Allah says in Quran, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. That don't you gaze in astonishment that your nafs, your khwaishat, your desires have become an ilah for you. They have become a god for you. You're worshipping them. So from this ayat mubarakah, this ayat karima, we see that we need to make tawbah. We need to remove these unlawful loves, unlawful desires from our heart. We need to make a true tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we don't make this tawbah, then there is a danger. Less because of this sin, our du'as may not be accepted. So we don't want to deprive ourselves of the barakah of such a night. And the second thing mentioned in this hadith was that we have to remove any such malice or ill will or such enmity and spite or hatred in our heart for other people around us. This is kina, malice. That a person, they sometimes they harbor such resentment in their heart for others. And again, if we reflect, we realize that today this is so common between in-laws, between siblings, two brothers, two sisters, husband and wife. So many times people are not talking to each other because they harbor this resentment, this malice. Until and unless this malice, this resentment, this kina is removed from our heart, du'as will not be accepted. We will not get that forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So before we make dua, we need to make true tawbah for these two sins. True tawbah from these two sins. Lest these two sins become an obstacle in the acceptance of our du'as. So we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable all of us that we can prepare ourselves for this month of Ramadan. May Allah ta'ala increase us in our ibadah, increase us in our a'mal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us more prepared and more aware and more grant us more tawfiq that we can inshallah excel not just in this month of Shaban but inshallah in the month of Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the barakat of Ramadan. Amir Rabbani rahmatullah said a very ajib thing about Ramadan. He says that the month of Ramadan itself, the whole month is so blessed, so beautiful, so much barakah. He says that one moment of Ramadan has so much so much power. Excuse me. One moment of Ramadan has so much power that it can, if a person spends that moment, if they can get that moment of rahmah, one moment has so much power, so much potential that it can turn a person who is a sinner into a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah ta'ala give us tawfiq that we can also maximize from this opportunity of Ramadan that is coming. May Allah ta'ala enable us to reach this month in a state of afiyah, in a state of preparedness. May Allah ta'ala grant us the best of Shaban and the best of Ramadan. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. So someone has asked a question that should be during the night of the 15th of Shaban, should we still sleep after Isha, since that's one of the preferred conditions for tahajjud, or should we stay awake as much as possible and do ibadah? Either way, the whole purpose is that we try to spend the night in ibadah as much as possible. If a person wants to sleep first and then rise up early and then do ibadah, that's also fine. If a person wishes to do ibadah first and then maybe sleep, that's also fine. If a person wants to spend the entire night in ibadah, that's nurun ala nur. So depending on where you are, you can check whether tonight or tomorrow will be the 15th of Shaban. The night will come first, followed by the day. No, there is no riwayat about reciting 3 times Surah Yasin on the 15th of Shaban. Yeah, there is no any specific ibadah that is prescribed from the 15th of Shaban. General ibadah, person should try to do as much ibadah as they can. Going with a short dua. سبحان ربنا وهب اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك منه عبدك ونبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك منه عبدك ونبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. صلى الله تعالى على حبيبي خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم.